The Georgia Bulldogs upset the Arkansas Razorbacks at home at Stegeman Coliseum, and it was a fantastic game. Look, Georgia in the first half just absolutely dominated the Hogs, forcing a lot of turnovers and had a 19-point lead at one point in this game. Arkansas climbs all the way back, gets it tied, but Georgia at the end of the game pushes through, finds a way to win, and will top this one off, winning 90-76 in a game that it felt like Georgia really, really needed after that home loss to Ole Miss earlier in the week. It was a huge win for Georgia as they beat one of the best teams in the SEC in Arkansas, and for Arkansas, you got to find a way to win on the road. It's been a tough thing so far for the Hogs. Can they do it later in SEC play? It's still early, but a fantastic win for Georgia as Blue Cane goes off in the clutch, scoring 18 points in an absolutely fantastic game in the SEC. This is Random SEC, and I am your host, Andrew, and what a fantastic game, fellas. Boys and girls, guys, it felt like just a game that was going to go all Georgia's way. They dominated the first half. They dominated going into this or coming out of the second half. Arkansas looked at a loss similar to last week against Auburn, where Arkansas just got demolished. It's been a trend that in the SEC on the road, it's been tough for Arkansas to find their way, especially early. Arkansas turned the ball over, 14 or 15 times in the first half. So that was really the difference in the game. So if you're Arkansas, you got to find a way to come out hot, even on the road. It's really tough to win road games in the SEC, I know, but the way Arkansas is playing, this is not going to be the elite team that's going to lead you to a Final Four, that's going to lead you to a national championship. I've seen, the bar to where Arkansas can be and where they can grow to be. And that is to the level of a national championship, to the level of a Final Four. But this today was not it. And it wasn't as bad as the Auburn game, but guys, you got to be consistent if you want to go deep in March. And obviously, that's what Arkansas wants to do. And today was not a shine of consistency. But all credit to Georgia because they came out ready to play, a dagger loss in midweek at home against an Ole Miss team that's it's one of your easier games at home. You lose that one, get upset in overtime at the buzzer, and you feel like it's a dagger, but no, Georgia comes out ready to play and takes it to Arkansas. They were physically dominant. They were just on the boards, on the turnovers. Everything was going Georgia's way. Obviously, though, Arkansas climbed their way back in it. I did like to see that from Arkansas because if you had another performance like that Auburn game where it was just a complete blowout the entire time, then some other discussions were to be had. But for Arkansas, I think the problem right now is you got to learn how to come out to play on the road, right? It is a tougher thing, especially with a younger team. But it really only felt like Arkansas, especially down the stretch, only had two or three guys to rely on. That was Billy Richmond and Darius Acuff. So besides those two guys who were really ready to play in this atmosphere the whole game, you really didn't have anything. Now, the players had spurts, DJ Wagner, Carter Knock, but no one really came completely ready to play, and I think that was a huge factor in this game. But Georgia, the story for Georgia was Somto Cyril was just an absolute force to reckon with defensively. I think that highlighted a weakness for Arkansas that they just really don't have a true big man. They thought Nick Pringle could be that guy. He just hasn't been. He hasn't been good enough on offense or defense for that matter. Trevin Brazil is obviously a fantastic player, and so is Malik Ewan, but they're just not the true big man that Somto Cyril is. He was just physically dominant, and really the only guy that could hang with him was Billy Richmond, and he's a guard. So that's just goes to show you if Arkansas has to go against a team with a true big man like that again, which they will, especially in March, then we're going to need to see some adjustments from Coach Gallup because that's simply not going to cut it. And I'm interested to see because Florida has a similar recipe like that, and even more so. So it's going to be tough sledding if you can't figure out a way to spread the floor out to prevent Somto Cyril or guys like him from getting theirs. In the second half, it was a little better for Arkansas, but still, he was a dominant factor in this game. But the real dominant factor, the real clutch factor at the end of this game was Blue Cane for Georgia. He just absolutely took over. And he had clutch threes after clutch threes. And it felt like Arkansas, after they tied the game up, it was going to go all in their favor. It felt like Georgia was collapsing. It felt like they were, lose that big of a lead, and you're like, what are we doing? It's over. But no, Blue Kane in the clutch gets some nice threes, gets some lays that were really tough. He ends up with 16 points, I think, or 18 points, yeah. And he was a guy that, I think I said before this game, he hasn't been great in conference play for Georgia. He's one of the more underrated players in the conference, but he could be really, really good. He could be elite. And he was so today. And it's a guy that you're going to need to get going if you're Georgia, right? Because the season is there's still a long way to go for you to be a solidified tournament team. So he's going to have to be going. Jeremiah Wilkinson had another great game. No surprise there. He's been absolutely fantastic all year. The transfer from Cal, and he was the same today. Him and Darius Acuff both had 20 points, and Cam Catchings for Georgia also had a great game. It was a game that was spread around. Georgia had a lot of guys just playing well, and that's what they needed. In the first half was just an utter domination, just like simply disappointing and embarrassing performance from Arkansas in the first half. They got it together in the second half, and it was just too little too late at the end of the day, because that 20-3 lead or whatever they had at the very beginning of the game was the difference. The turnovers for Arkansas, the just coming out sluggish after last week, that's embarrassing. So Coach Cal's got to do some soul searching for this Arkansas team. Like, obviously, they're still probably a top 3 team in the SEC, and they have a lot in front of them, but a lot needs to be fixed as well, because this simply is not going to cut it moving forward. If we're being quite honest, this is not the winning recipe. But it's not over. We are only 4 games into conference play, 5 games, whatever it is, and there's still so much to go. But if you're Arkansas, you got to turn the page quickly, because you have Vanderbilt at home, another tough game. Vanderbilt, one of the best teams in the country, one of the best teams in the SEC. They lost today, so their backs are going to be against the wall going on the road to Bud Walton Arena. So Arkansas, you're going to need to see a ruckus atmosphere, because that's a game it feels like you need to win now after you lose this one to Georgia on the road. The story is Georgia, though, and I can't highlight it enough. Blue Kane, a guy that Georgia needed to show up in this game, just did in every sense of the fashion, and he came up in clutch. And he's one of those guys that once they're on and once they're playing well, you can't really stop them. And it's really, really fun to watch him, because he's a dynamic player, and the fact that he can shoot the three well, and also get those tough lays. It kind of DJ Wagner-esque, like the player for Arkansas. But if you can make him consistent, then Georgia is going to be a force to reckon with throughout the SEC this year. And that was a huge win for Georgia's tournament resume. Let's be honest, guys. It was at home, a quad one victory, and one of the better teams in the SEC. So, I mean, there's not too much more to say for Georgia. Somto Cyril is a guy that he balled out 6 points, but he was just such a big factor defensively. And I think one thing you have to worry about is for sometimes Cyril is he's got to remain level-headed. Look, I know in points in this game he may have gotten roughed up a little bit, but it's been a theme all year. You cannot have him getting technicals. You cannot have him going out of the game, because he's just too important for Georgia. So it's a better issue. I feel like you would want to have that issue more than others. But it cannot continue to be this for Georgia, because Somto Cyril is too vital to this team to be sitting out on the bench or in the locker room. But guys, the starting lineup for Georgia was just, it was a recipe for success, and it was kind of that same thing that remained all game. And I think also a big theme for this game was Arkansas's bench. They aren't as deep as Georgia. They aren't as deep as a lot of teams, because Coach Cal's thing is kind of get 8 or 9 guys that are really good. But in games like this, where you are just absolutely getting blown out in the first half, it would be nice to kind of just have a fresh lineup out there, right? Just get something going. And then that way, if you do make a comeback like they did, then your guys aren't physically worn out at the end of the game like they were. Arkansas was simply just absolutely worn out at the end of the game after tying it. But I mean, an impressive performance in Arkansas for the second half. Like, let's not take that away from them. They were dead to rights, right? They were down 19. They could have very well easily thrown in the towel like they did against, or I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say they did against Auburn, but it could have been similar to the Auburn game. But no, they climbed back. They played some great offense, and they come back in this game. But eventually, it wasn't enough, right? So it's been a theme also in the SEC that we have some high scoring games, and for Arkansas, you got a lot to go, but Georgia, wow, what a performance from Blue Cane. And I am just so pumped to watch this team. And you have to go on the road next to Missouri. Missouri coming off a loss to LSU, so you'll have their best performance as well. And once again, it's kind of that theme in the SEC, backs against the wall, teams that need a win. You don't want to play them. And that was Georgia today, and that will be Missouri next week for Georgia as they play them. And for Arkansas, you're going to get everyone's best shot. I've said it once, I'll say it again. You, Florida, and sometimes Kentucky this year, you're the team everyone in the conference wants to beat. So you're going to get everyone's best shot, and you got to be ready for that. I mean, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for Arkansas to have the first half that did this game, and I trust Cal to fix that. But just a utter embarrassment in the first half, but a pretty good second half, and it's just a fun game to watch, guys. A fun day of SEC basketball so far, and so much more to come as Texas and Texas A&M will be battling it out tonight or whenever you watch this. We hope that is a great game, as well as we've had these first 3 or 4 games have been equally to Oklahoma, Auburn, a comeback win for Alabama, or Oklahoma, Alabama, a comeback win for Alabama. Kentucky, Tennessee, a comeback win for Kentucky, almost a comeback win here in Georgia and Arkansas. And then obviously we had that fantastic game in Florida and Vanderbilt as Florida pulls off the win on the road. So just a absolute killer day for the SEC. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is Random SEC. We're just starting out on YouTube. We have it pretty good on our social platforms, so please follow us up on there. At the Random SEC, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, and especially Instagram. But we're still growing here on YouTube, so a subscribe, a comment, a like, everything you can do would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, and the Georgia Bulldogs roll on. See you later.